and we're working Odyssey into what we do, but still it's tough because point guards are the ones who get you organized. And
I don't even fully know how to process what I just witnessed. I don't even know how to articulate what God or fate or basketball itself just gave me the honor. The raw pleasure, the privilege of witnessing with my own eyes and with my heart pounding out of my chest. But I know for certain that it was one of the most exhilarating, nerve-wracking, soul-shaking, spine-tingling, goosebump-inducing games of basketball that I have ever seen in my life. And the sheer electricity of it all was so overwhelming that I found myself reacting in ways I didn't even know were possible. My voice went up into pitches that I didn't even know my body was capable of hitting. I probably sounded like a child, like a fan who had waited their entire life for a moment like this. Maybe I even sounded like Elmo screaming in the house because I was literally jumping up and down with every shot, with every possession, with every swing of momentum. And in those moments nothing else in the world mattered. Nothing outside of that court, those players, that crowd, and that story being written before my eyes mattered, because it felt bigger than basketball. It felt like history. It felt like spirit. It felt like something eternal was unfolding. And that is why I can say with all my soul that this was the most excited I have been in a very long time, and it reminded me once again why basketball is not just a sport but a living, breathing epic that unites people in joy, pain, and awe. Before I even dig into the details of the game itself, before I break down who did what, who hit which shot, and who made which mistake, I want to start with this very clear statement, and I want to say it with conviction. Every single person who spent the last week doubting, who said that this NBA Finals was going to be boring, who said that there was no real story here, who laughed at the matchup and mocked the excitement, who claimed that the league was falling apart and that ratings were about to collapse, those people were wrong. They were short-sighted. They were blinded by narratives and missed the essence of basketball, because if you actually love this game, if you understand what competition, resilience, strategy, and raw willpower look like, then you knew before Game 1 even tipped off that this was going to be special. Because how could it not be when you have the Oklahoma City Thunder, one of the grittiest, youngest, hungriest, most defensively locked in, and emotionally bonded teams in the league, led by Shayad Alexander, a man who is not just a star, but a force of nature, standing across from the Indiana Pacers, a team that embodies the very definition of heart, a team that refuses to die, refuses to quit, refuses to believe that anything is over no matter how impossible the situation looks. A team that is 10 deep with guys who can come in and make plays, who trust each other, who sacrifice for each other, who share the ball and play with an energy that refuses to be extinguished. So how could anyone who truly loves basketball ever think that this series was not going to be fun? Not going to be exciting, not going to be one of those finals that people talk about years later, and yet people did. People doubted. People disrespected, and I didn't even respond online. I didn't post a rant. I didn't clap back on social media. But in my head, I battled every single one of them, because deep down, I knew what was coming. And now, after Game 1, after seeing what we just saw, I can confidently say that those of us who believed, who knew, who anticipated, we were right all along. Because that was not just basketball, that was theater, that was poetry, that was war, that was art. And it was spectacular in every way that you want the finals to be. From the very start of the game, you could feel the tension, you could feel the weight of it, the way every possession mattered. The way the crowd in OKC was absolutely electric, roaring with an energy that felt like it could shake the building apart. Because this city has been waiting. This city has been dreaming of a championship, and they are desperate to will their team to it. And you could hear them over the commentators. You could feel them through the television, like waves of sound hitting the court. And it was beautiful, because this is what finals basketball is supposed to feel like. In Indiana, they walked into that hostile environment and they did not flinch. They did not shrink. They did not lose their identity, because this Indiana Pacers team, led by Tyrese Halliburton, has a soul, has a fire, has a belief that no matter how bad it looks, no matter how much the clock is against them, no matter how high the lead is stacked for the opponent, the game is never over. And as a fan of this team, I never gave up either. I never sat back and said, well, that's it, this one's lost. Because deep down I knew, I always knew, and that's what makes this team so unique, so special, so unforgettable, that you can be down 9 points with 40 seconds left. A situation where most teams fold, where most fans turn off the TV, and yet with Indiana, you still believe, you still feel hope, you still expect a miracle. Because miracles are not outliers for this team. They are part of the fabric of who they are, and tonight was proof of that again, because shot after shot, play after play, possession after possession, they reminded the world that they don't die, they don't quit, they don't disappear when it matters most. They rise, they fight, they deliver, and that is why this game is going to be remembered for a long time. Now let's talk about Tyrese Halliburton, because this man is the story. This man is the reason Indiana is here. This man is the heartbeat, the anchor, the conductor, the one who makes everything possible. And tonight he showed again why he is not just an all-star, not just a good player, not just a nice piece on a nice team, but a true superstar. And I mean that word, with all the weight it carries. Because being a superstar is not simply about putting up big stats. It's not simply about efficiency or shooting percentages or even wins. It's about moments. It's about legacy. It's about how many people turn on their TV to watch you. How many people scream your name. How many times you show up when everything is on the line. When the season, the series, the reputation of your franchise is dangling by a thread, and you decide in that instant that you will be the one to write the story. You will be the one to carry the burden. You will be the one to deliver. And Tyrese Halliburton did exactly that. People mocked him. Richard Jefferson went on air and said you can't be putting up tour dates in the finals. And maybe that was funny for a moment. But what Halliburton showed is that you absolutely can. Because if the tour is worth seeing, if the show is unforgettable, if the performance is spectacular, then put up as many tour dates as you want, because the fans are going to show up. The world is going to tune in, and the memory is going to live forever. And that shot at the end, that cold-blooded, fearless, unshaken shot, was exactly why he belongs in the conversation of superstars. Stephen A. always says that being a superstar is about showing up in the biggest moments. In the moments that define legacies. In the moments that decide whether history remembers you, or forgets you. And Tyrese Halliburton showed up. He called his own number. He didn't care how many shots he had missed earlier. He didn't care that he wasn't dominating the box score in the fourth. He said, I am here. I am him. I have done this before. And I am going to do it again. And he delivered. And that is what being a superstar is. But it wasn't just Halliburton. Because this Indiana Pacers team wins by committee. They win because everybody contributes. Everybody steps up. And tonight you saw it. You saw Aaron Nesmith hitting insane shots from the corner, fading away with the clock against him. You saw Miles Turner banking in impossible looks. You saw role players making big plays. Because this team embodies trust and resilience. And that is why they scare even the best team in the league. Oklahoma City played amazing. Shai was incredible as always. Caruso was tough and relentless. Lou Dort was hitting shots like he was possessed. And the Thunder looked every bit like the powerhouse they've been all year. But in the end, they missed a few shots. Nothing egregious. Nothing embarrassing. Just normal misses that happen in the heat of the game. And Indiana doesn't miss in those moments. Indiana makes the shots they shouldn't. Indiana bends probability. Indiana rewrites logic. And that's why they stole Game 1 in a way that leaves you believing they can win this series outright. And I know the world will still say OKC is the better team, and on paper, they are. You can see the defensive rotations, the offensive weapons, the depth, the coaching, and yet Indiana has this aura, this mystique, this thing you can't quantify, and it makes me believe they could win this series in 5. And I don't even think that's crazy. I don't even think that's bias talking. I think that's reality. Because if this was a sloppy game for Indiana, a game with turnovers, a game where their defense wasn't even at its best, then what happens when they clean it up, when they tighten the screws, when they raise their level another notch? What happens then? This is why I'm so unbelievably excited for the next 6 games. Because if this was just the beginning, if this was just the appetizer, then what's coming next is going to be legendary. And if you can't see that, if you can't feel that, then maybe you never loved basketball in the first place, because this is it. This is the essence. This is why we watch. This is why we scream. This is why we cry. This is why we live and die with every bounce of the ball. Because moments like this make us feel alive. And tonight I felt more alive.
Led to the disorganization that you saw on the offensive end tonight?
Well, all of our point guards are injured. I think that's the first thing. And again, it's one.
Indiana is always a fascinating team to watch because of how unorthodox their approach can be. And one of the things that stands out is the number of open layups they allow. which at first glance seems like a weakness but almost feels intentional, at times, as if they're willing to trade an easy bucket just so they can immediately push the pace and catch the opponent off guard in transition. And when you look at their style of play, it honestly does feel like this is part of the game, planned, because this team thrives in chaos, thrives in speed, thrives in constant motion, and their confidence on offense is so high that they almost treat defense as a setup for their transition game rather than the focal point of their identity. But the reality is their defense still needs work, and going forward,